You know, critics of Donald Trump often talk about his first term as a kind of nightmare that will end and things will go back to normal again. What everyone thinks of this unusual presidency, that view actually imagines Trump as sort of special or a driver of everything rather than a symptom of broader challenges. But think about it. This nationalism, alleged populism, and xenophobia powering Trump are rising in many different countries, along with diminishing standards for who should even hold high office. Consider that one of the nations closest to the U.S., England, just picked this unusual fellow to be prime minister, a thought so absurd he himself dismissed it.
Is there a possibility you could become prime minister?
I think that is vanishing. I mean, I've about as much chance of being reincarnated as an olive.
You think the hair is holding you back? Honestly.
Well, the hair's not holding him back. Boris Johnson taking over as UK Prime Minister, and many note his Trumpian echoes. Some of it is about style, like, look at this, the hair. Some of it is about being controversial. Both of these leaders lambasted by their own dedicated British blimps. But it's also about an emerging political project with appeals to populism that meet a kind of gauche celebrity. Johnson wasn't taken very seriously in the U.S., but he built a big following, especially recently riding the Brexit wave. He also, we must note, did a lot of race baiting. He recently invoked birtherism to impugn Obama's foreign policy as part Kenyan. And now some Brits are feeling like many Americans did as Donald Trump took on the trappings of the presidency, as they witnessed this today, Johnson addressing the parliament. I'm joined now by White House columnist for The Hill, Niall Stanage. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Gary.
Just for full context, let's take in a little bit of Boris over the years.
It was all going well, and then not so well, and then really badly.
This is the best bit. He actually pulls down the volunteer with him.
It's going well, very, very well organised. What they do, get me a ladder.
Sir, I ask you, what is happening?
Well, I mean, when you're negotiating a complicated issue like trying to go through with Brexit, what other man would you choose than the sort of man indulging in those kind of antics? But look, there is a serious point here, Ari, and you alluded to it in your introduction. Boris Johnson, like the pre-presidency Donald Trump, has been dismissed as a kind of buffoon. And sometimes I think the buffoonery or the perceived buffoonery distracts from the belligerence here. Johnson has said a lot of nasty things, a lot of racist things, some homophobic things. He has seized upon a kind of sentimental old England image, much in the same way, or in at least a parallel way, to how President Trump plays back to a supposedly golden era in the United States.
And you mentioned that, and it's a bit like Brexit was Trumpian as policy. It wasn't taken very seriously. It is happening, apparently. Here was Boris Johnson on that. Again, an appeal to working class people, but many have criticized this as, will it really be in their interest long term? Take a look.
People who bet against Britain are going to lose their shirts because we're going to restore trust in our democracy. And we're going to fulfill the repeated promises of Parliament to the people and come out of the EU on October the 31st. No ifs or buts.
Now?
Well, I mean, Boris Johnson's a bad person to be talking about trust. This is a person who, in common with the president, has shown a disdain for truth in his political career and sometimes a disdain for basic decency. Now, he does have in common with Trump an anti-elite kind of image. In Johnson's case, it's just as peculiar, coming from a background that includes Eton College, the most elite private school in Britain, and Oxford University, as much as it is Donald Trump acting as a man of the people, having resided in a gold tower for quite a few years. But Johnson has seized on this anti-elite sentiment to his own benefit.
Niall Stanage, you break it down clearly and concisely. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Ari.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.